Namaste, Dandavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're also paying our humble Dandavat Pranam to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada for providing us this wonderful commentary and translation of Bhagavatam. And we're also praying to Srimati Radharani, following the instruction of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who said unless we can learn something about Srimati Radharani within the 18,000 verses of Bhagavatam, then our study has been for waste. So we're praying to Srimati Radharani in this way. Yadi seva vanchitasyama yasya kripaya vayam labema sarvam prapnuma prayojanam Damni Shri Bhagavat Pade Krishna Sambandhi Sarvam Cha Yadina Jani Mahe Tutam Ashtadashasu Sahasreshu Shlokanam Bhagavat Oktishu Radharanimna Vindamatada Nishvalam Bhagavat Adhyayanam Radhi Kaya Kripam Vina Vyartasyat Sarva Parishrama. If we are cheated out of serving that personality whose mercy awards us everything we need, including residence in the Lord's holy Dham and all things connected to Krishna, and if we cannot understand or discover Radharani within the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, then our study of Srimad Bhagavatam has been pointless. Without the mercy of Srimati Radharani, all our efforts are in vain. So we are continuing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order, chapter 29. Talks between Nārada and King Prācīnabarhi. Text 81. Prācīnabarhi Rajarsi Praja Sarga Birakshane Adisya Putran Agamat Tapase Kapilashramam. In the presence of his ministers, the saintly King Prācīnabarhi left orders for his sons to protect the citizens. He then left home and went off to undergo austerities in a holy place known as Kapilashram. Purport. The word Prajasarga is very important in this verse. When the saintly King Prācīnabarhi was induced by the great sage Nārada to leave home and take to the devotional service of the Lord, his sons had not yet returned from their austerities in the water. However, he did not wait for their return, but simply left messages to the effect that his sons were to protect the mass of citizens. According to Viraraghava Acharya, such protection means organizing the citizens into the specific divisions of the 4 varnas and 4 ashrams. It was the responsibility of the royal order to see that the citizens were following regulative principles of the 4 varnas, namely Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra, and the ashrams, namely Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. It is very difficult to rule citizens in a kingdom without organizing this Vanashram Dharma. To rule the mass of citizens in a state and keep them in a complete progressive order is not possible simply by passing laws every year in a legislative assembly. The Varnashram Dharma is essentially in a good government. One class of men, the Brahmanas, must be intelligent and Brahminically qualified. Another class must be trained in administrative work, Kshatriya. Another in mercantile business, Vaishya. And another simply in labor, Sudra. These 4 classes of men are already there according to nature, but it is the government's duty to see that all 4 of these classes follow the principles of their varnas methodically. This is called abhirakshana, or protection. It's significant that when Maharaj Prācīnabarhi was convinced of the goal of life through the instructions of Nārada, he did not wait even a moment to see if his sons returned, but left immediately. There are many things to be done upon the return of his sons, but he simply left them a message. He knew what his prime duty was. He simply left instructions for his sons and went off for the purpose of spiritual advancement. This is the system of Vedic civilization. Sridhar Swami informs us that Kapila Ashram is located at the confluence of the Ganges and the Bay of Bengal, a place known now as Ganga Sagar. This place is still famous as a place of pilgrimage, and many millions of people gather there every year on the day of Makara Sankranti and take bath. It's called Kapila Ashram because of Lord Kapila's living there to perform his austerities and penances. Lord Kapila propounded the Sankhya system of philosophy. Text 82. Tatraikagra manadiro Govinda charanam bhujam Vimukta shango nubhajan Bhaktya tat samyatam magat. Having undergone austerities and penances at Kapila Ashram, King Prācīnabarhi attained full liberation from all material designations. He constantly engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and attained a spiritual position qualitatively equal to that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. There is special significance in the words Tat Samyatam Magat, which indicate that the king attained the position of possessing the same status or the same form as that of the Lord. This definitely proves that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always a person. In his impersonal feature, he is the rays of his transcendental body. When a living entity attains spiritual perfection, he also attains the same type of body known as Satchidananda Vigraha. This spiritual body never mixes with the material elements. Although in conditional life, the living entity is surrounded by material elements, earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and ego, he remains always aloof from them. In other words, the living entity can be liberated from the material condition at any moment, provided that he wishes to do so. The material environment is called Maya. According to Krishna, Daivi Hyesha Guna Mai Mama Maya Daratyaya Mam Evaye Prapadyante Mayam Etam Tarantite. This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Bhagavad Gita 7.14. As soon as the living entity engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he immediately attains freedom from all material conditions. Sa gunan samitityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. In the material state, the living entity is on the Jiva Bhuta platform, but when he renders devotional service to the Lord, he is elevated to the Brahma Bhuta platform. On the Brahma Bhuta platform, the living entity is liberated from material bondage, and he engages in the service of the Lord. In this verse, the word dhira is sometimes read as vira. Actually, there is not very much difference. The word dhira means sober, and vira means hero. One who is struggling against Maya is a hero, and one who is sober enough to understand his position is a dhira. Without becoming sober or heroic, one cannot attain spiritual salvation. Text 83. Etad adhyatma paroksham gitam devar shinangana gitam devar sinanaga yashravayed yashrunuyat salingena vimuchate. My dear Vidura, one who hears this narration concerning the understanding of the living entity's spiritual existence as described by the great sage Nārada, or who relates it to others, will be liberated from the bodily conception of life. Purport. This material creation is the spirit soul's dream. Actually, all existence in the material world is a dream of Mahavishnu, as the Brahma Samhita describes. Yakara nara vajale bhajate sma yoga nidram ananta jagadanda saroma kupa. This material world is created by the dreaming of Mahavishnu. The real factual platform is the spiritual world, but when the spirit soul wants to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is put into this dreamland of material creation. After being in contact with the material modes of nature, the living entity develops the subtle and gross bodies. When the living entity is fortunate enough to associate with Nārada, Sri Nārada Mahamuni, or his servants, he is liberated from this dreamland of material creation and the bodily conception of life. Text 84. Etan mukunda yassasa bhuvanam punanam devarshi varya mukha nishritam atma sucham yakirtyamanam adi gajati paramestyam nasmin bhave brahmati mukta samasta bandha. This narration, spoken by the great sage Nārada, is full of transcendental fame of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, this narration, when described, certainly sanctifies this material world. It purifies the heart of the living entity and helps him attain his spiritual identity. One who relates this transcendental narration will be liberated from all material bondage and will no longer have to wander within this material world. Purport. As indicated in verse 79, Nārada Muni advises King Prācīnabarhi to take to devotional service rather than waste time performing ritualistic ceremonies and fruitive activities. The vivid descriptions of the subtle and gross bodies in this chapter are most scientific, and because they are given by the great sage Nārada, they are authoritative. Because these narrations are full of the glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they constitute the most effective process for the purification of the mind. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirmed, Cheto Dharpanam Arjanam, the more we talk of Krishna, think of Krishna, and preach for Krishna, the more we become purified. This means we no longer have to accept the hallucinatory, gross, and subtle body, but instead attain our spiritual identity. One who tries to understand this instructive spiritual knowledge is delivered from the ocean of nescience. The word paramestyam is very significant in this connection. Paramestyam is also called Brahmaloka. It is the planet on which Lord Brahma lives. The inhabitants of Brahmaloka always discuss such narrations so that after the annihilation of the material world, they can be directly transferred to the spiritual world. One who is transferred to the spiritual world does not have to go up and down within this material world. Sometimes spiritual activities are also called paramestyam. Text 85. Adhyatma paroksham idam mayhadi gatam adbhutam evam striyashrama pumshas chino mutra cha samshaya. The allegory of King Puranjana, described herein according to authority, was heard by me from my spiritual master, and it is full of spiritual knowledge. If one can understand the purpose of this allegory, he will certainly be relieved from the bodily conception and will clearly understand life after death. Although one may not understand what transmigration of the soul actually is, one can fully understand it by studying this narration. Purport. The word striya, meaning along with the wife, is significant. The male and female living together constitute the sum and substance of material existence. The attraction between male and female in this material world is very strong. In all species of life, the attraction between male and female is the basic principle of existence. The same principle of intermingling is also in human society, but is in a regulative form. Material existence means living together as male and female and being attracted by one another. However, when one fully understands spiritual life, his attraction for the opposite sex is completely vanquished. By such attraction, one becomes overly attached to this material world. It is a hard knot within the heart. Pumsastriya mituni bhavam etam tayor mito hridaya grantim ahu ato griha kshetra sutapta vitar janasya mohoyam mahammameti. Bhagavatam 5.5.8. Everyone comes to this material world attracted to sense gratification, and the hard knot of sense gratification is the attraction between male and female. By this attraction, one becomes overly attached to the material world in terms of griha, kshetra, sutta, apta, vita, that is home, land, children, friends, money, and so forth. Thus, one becomes entangled in the bodily conception of I and mine. However, if one understands the story of King Puranjana and understands how, by sexual attraction, Puranjana became a female in his next life, one will also understand the process of transmigration. Special note: according to Vijayadvaja Tirtha, who belongs to the Madhava Charya Sampradaya, the first two of the following verses appear after verse 45 of this chapter, and the remaining two verses appear after verse 79. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from this verse on Wednesday. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Guru Dev, Srila Acharya Dev Ki Jai. Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees, Sama Bhaktivedanta Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Giri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai, Shamkund Radhakund Ki Jai, Tosi Devi Bhakti Devi, Vrinda Devi Ki Jai, Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Jai Shrimati Uma Devi Dasi Ki Jai.
जय गुरुदेव। श्रीपाद कृष्ण केशव प्रभु जी की जय।